not stop singing. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing till the world can hear the song, till the world can sing along. We will not stop marching. We will not stop marching. We will not stop marching till the world can hear the song, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along.
We will not stop praying. We will not stop praying. We will not stop praying till we all can get along, till the world can sing our song. We will not stop shouting. We will not stop shouting. We will not stop shouting, shouting right from wrong, till the world can sing our song. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. Till the world can sing, till the world can sing, till the world can sing along. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing. We will not stop singing till the world can hear our song, till the world can sing along.
Welcome, everyone, to the final service in our worship series, Side with Love. This month, we've been celebrating 30 days of love. This week, we explore the restoration and repair of love as we live it in our daily lives. Last month, we witnessed the opposite of love as an angry mob, fueled not by love, but hatred, as it stormed our nation's capital and attacked our democracy. When we witness such harmful actions, it's easy to become overwhelmed with despair and lose hope for a better and more just world. That's why we rejoice and are inspired by true stories that illustrate how love's power can change the course of one's life. This morning, the Reverend Daniel Kanter, senior minister at the First Unitarian Church of Dallas, has such a true story to tell us. He's entitled his sermon, When Hate Turns to Compassion. And although Reverend Kanter delivered this message several years ago, it is as relevant in 2021 as it was in 2018. I hope you'll find it as inspiring as I did. We continue now with our service with the lighting of the chalice. Thank you again for coming and to be with us today.
May the love that gives to life its beauty, the reverence that gives life its sacredness, and the purpose that gives life its deep significance be strong within each of us and lead us into ever deepening relationships with all of life.
Hello, so my name is Sophia and I am the Director of Religious Exploration at UUFEC, and today we're going to be reading the book called Stella Brings the Family. Okay. With a hug goodbye, Stella dashed to her cubby and raced to her spot. Mrs. Abbott had a surprise for the class. "We are going to have a celebration for Mother's Day," she said, "and each of you can invite a special guest." Jonathan and Leon said they'd invite their moms. Carmen was sure his mama would come. But Stella had 2 dads. Everyone else had a mother. Howie had 2. Stella would be the only one without a mother at the Mother's Day party. That afternoon, Stella and her clay stared at each other. The next day, Stella worried about the party when she should have been worrying about other things. All week, Stella's appetite was gone. "What's wrong with Stella?" Jonathan asked. "I have no mother to bring for the Mother's Day celebration." "No mother?" asked Leon. "But who packs your lunch like my mom does for me?" "Daddy knows just what I like," said Stella. "The problem isn't lunch. It's that I have no mother to bring for the Mother's Day party." "No mother?" asked Howie. "But who reads you bedtime stories like my mothers do for me?" "Daddy and Papa read stories to me," said Stella. "But who kisses you when you are hurt?" Carmen asked. "Well, that's a long answer," said Stella. "I get lots of kisses when I'm hurt, either from Papa or Daddy, or Nona, or Aunt Gloria, or Uncle Bruno, or Cousin Lucy. But I still have no special guest for Mother's Day." Jonathan asked, "Why don't you invite them all?" "What a wonderful idea," Papa and Daddy said. But Stella wasn't so sure. Soon, the children were crafting invitations, decorating, and preparing gifts. Stella worked harder than everyone. The big day arrived. Daddy, Papa, Nona, Uncle Bruno, Aunt Gloria, and Cousin Lucy went with Stella to school. She had so many guests. Stella hoped it would be okay. The party was better than Stella had imagined. Howie came with his 2 moms, and Jonathan brought his grandmother while his mom was away. Stella had the biggest crowd of all. They squeezed into the story circle and made frames of their art. Stella thought the day was turning out fine. In fact, it was better than fine. Papa was a big hit. Later that day, Mrs. Abbott was worn out. Stella told her not to worry. For Father's Day, she wouldn't bring nearly as many people. Just 2. And then you can see Howie, who has 2 moms, scratching his head saying, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do for the Father's Day party?" And I forgot to mention who the author was. So this is Stella brings the family, and it's by Miriam B. Schiffer and illustrations by Holly Clifton Brown. So I apologize for missing that in the beginning. And I think what's really important about this book is it just reminds us that everybody's family looks a little different, and that is totally okay. Some families have 2 dads, some families have 2 moms, some families have a mom and a dad, some families just have 1 mom or 1 dad, and sometimes grandparents are taking care of their grandkids. So it's just important to remember that love makes a family, right? And it doesn't matter exactly who, but that every family looks a little different, but that they still have a lot of love. Okay, have a good day.
Greetings, friends. I am so honored to be with you for this service. The reading is called Set in Stone. In a cemetery once in old New England, I found a strangely soothing epitaph. The name of the deceased and her dates had been scoured away by wind and rain, but there was a carving of a tree and roots and branches, a classic 19th century motif, and among them the words, "She attended well and faithfully to a few worthy things." At first, this seemed to me a little meager, a little stingy on the part of her survivors, but I wrote it down and I've thought about it since, and now I can't imagine a more proud or satisfying legacy. She attended well and faithfully to a few worthy things. Every day, I stand in danger of being struck by lightning and having the obituary in the local paper say, for all the world to see, "She attended frantically and ineffectually to a great many unimportant, meaningless details." How do you want your obituary to read? "He got all the dishes washed and dried before playing with his children in the evening. She balanced her checkbook with meticulous precision, never missed a day of work, missed a lot of sunsets, missed a lot of love, missed a lot of risk, missed a lot, but her money was in order. She answered all her calls, all her email, all her voicemail, but along the way she forgot to answer the call to service and compassion and forgiveness, first and foremost of herself. He gave and forgave sparingly, without radical intention, without passion or conviction. She could not, would not hear the calling of her heart. How will it read? How does it read? And if you had to name a few worthy things to which you will attend faithfully and well, what, I wonder, would they be?
So some of you know that many of you know that we are in a year we're calling a year of lives of courage, where we look at various aspects of courage, courage to change and grow, courage to learn, courage to say yes, to say no, many different aspects. And we're focusing in this first 3 weeks of this year on a series we're calling the Moral Alchemy, how we change with courage through one aspect of who we are to become something else. Today we're looking at how hate becomes compassion. Now I was thinking about this, and I think about my childhood. I remember my mother always said, hate's a very strong word. If you use it, you become that. So don't use that word, she would say. And I was thinking about what is it that I actually hated as a child. And one thing that I hated was that we had to be at war. I was a child of the 70s and watched the Vietnam War on television. Every time I saw a child on TV in Vietnam, I felt the pain of their suffering. And I, like many, wanted that war to end. I'm not making a judgment on the war itself. But there was a hateful feeling I had for the agents of war. The other thing that I hated was smoking. You see, I became somewhat of a anti-smoking evangelist. The only thing I know about that is I would go around and put up posters, kind of like this one, in people's homes, in my school, everywhere I could. People remember this one? On my good days, I put up this one. But I remember breaking people's cigarettes and telling them that they were doing the wrong thing. This was a personal mission of mine somehow. It came from this hateful place for the smell and the experience. I'm not making a judgment on you if you're a smoker now. I'm just telling you that was my experience as a child. And as an adult, I look back and I actually realized the reason for that was that my father had an internal bleed when I was 5 and actually died and was revived. And he was sick all his life. And I think now looking back, I transposed that experience of being a child with a sick father into seeing how people made a choice that could lead them to illness and not wanting the other children around me to have to suffer in that way. So I turned this sort of internal pain into a kind of hatred for this thing. I know that now. I didn't know that back then. I wasn't a hateful kid. I didn't commit acts of violence, except if you were around and I saw your pack of cigarettes, I might try to get rid of it. I did know about other forms of hate. I knew about racism, and I knew about Nazism. Half of my family were Russian Jews. Many of them died in Russia, Poland. And I knew those kinds of violent acts extended from those movements. But what I didn't know at the time was that there was a growing movement in this country of neo-Nazis, both in the 70s and in the 80s. And today, our focal point, each Sunday, we've had a focal point, a person who lived a life of courage and moved in their own life from one aspect of themselves to another. Today, we're looking at Christian Picciolini, who at age 14 in the 1980s was standing in an alleyway smoking a joint. Someone said to me, you smoke a joint like this. I was like, yeah, I know that. He was smoking a joint in an alleyway, and a man in his 20s came up to him, pulled it out of his mouth, threw it down, and said, the communists and the Jews want you to do that so that you become docile. Picciolini's joke about this is he didn't even know what communists were, and he didn't know what Jews were, and he certainly didn't know what docile was. But he started to follow this man, Clark Martel, to meetings of neo-Nazis. This was a movement that was growing in Chicago area at the time. He said that what he felt in meeting this man was through his charisma that he embodied a sense of respect, leadership. He said he gained a kind of lifeline of acceptance in that moment. Now, what Picciolini was dealing with was a low self-esteem, a sense of not belonging. He himself was an immigrant of Italian parents who were working class people, and he looked at them and saw how they struggled, and he said he didn't know where he was. He didn't know where he belonged. He was floundering in school and at home. And this group gave him a sense of meaning. He shaved his head. He put on combat boots. He started to get into fights with the people who were bullying him at school. All of a sudden, he was embodied with a sense of power. He said he didn't join the neo-Nazis because of prejudice. It didn't start there. He says in his experience, his family, who were Italian immigrants, had experienced a kind of ethnic prejudice, but rather he joined this group out of a sense of gaining back some pride and some respect. And this is where he started to get deeper and deeper into the neo-Nazi movement. They had a kind of formula where they made this internal move with the recruits they had. They instilled in him a sense of pride first. Pride in his Italian heritage, pride in his whiteness. Then they moved him to fear that he would lose that pride, that somebody would take it away from him if he wasn't careful. And then they started naming specific groups through conspiracy theories who were supposedly bent on taking away his pride and his privilege. They created a fear rhetoric that aimed itself at Black community, at Jewish communities, and at Mexicans. And it started to turn into violence. Now I'm going to show you a picture of Christian Picciolini as this young man. These pictures in and of themselves do a kind of violence to this sanctuary, so we're going to look at them rather quickly, but I want to give you the context. This is him as a young man with his neo-Nazi friends and with his bandmates. He started a white power rock band motivated by the punk music of England to, in turn, encourage youth to acts of violence and to speak to their vulnerabilities through their grievances. He helped them feel this promise of paradise in regaining their power, but aimed it in a way through a violence toward others. He says now, it was for us our expression of our low self-esteem to be able to project our pain onto other people. They went on to violent acts. They started to attack people indiscriminately. They attacked people of color, and they attacked Jewish people, and they attacked anti-racist activists. That would be us. They would attack homeless people just because. At 18 or 19, Picciolini became the leader of one of the most prominent neo-Nazi skinhead organizations in America. And he had a moment in his life that changed him. And that's where the moral alchemy comes in. This moment was a moment where a group of his friends, the ones you see here, had been drinking heavily, and they walked in late at night into a McDonald's and loudly proclaimed that they now owned this McDonald's, to which a group of Black youth got up and left. And of course, they chased after them. And one of the Black teenagers who was running across the street turned and pulled a gun. This was Chicago, difficult area, and he started to fire, and the gun jammed, and Picciolini caught up with the man and started to beat him very badly. As Picciolini was kicking the man on the ground, he tells this story. He says, the man's eyes opened and looked into mine. He says he remembers feeling a deep connection or empathy for this person that he didn't know and was actually trying to kill. This is what he said. He said, when our eyes connected, I thought for an instant that this could be someone I loved. Could be my brother, could be my mother or father. That there were people that would be impacted by my actions. And that was the last time I committed an act of violence, he said. I don't know who the person was, and I don't know what happened to him, but that moment changed my life. When I heard this story, I thought about this painting by Titian. It is an old painting of an ancient story. A man beating another, in fact, a brother, killing another. It is Cain and Abel. And I thought about how that story is so deeply baked into the first book of one of the most ancient, most read books in history. And how just its presence in the literature means that hatred as a source of violence has its place among us since our beginnings. That the instruction against hatred and violence is also embedded deep in us, in the fact that this story exists. And I thought that eradicating this violent tendency in the human heart is also difficult, if not impossible. That hate comes from a deep insecurity, like mine as a child whose father died and was reborn in a sense. Picciolini's is more serious in a sense. He was someone who had to recover his pride, turning from hatred to empathy. All this means is that it is possible to turn those most feared parts of who we are into strong bonds of the Spirit. It is possible to move ourselves from even mild forms of hate to empathy. The Cain and Abel story tells us that the solutions are God's, that there is a revolutionary principle in the story, that we are endowed with a moral autonomy. The story asks, am I my brother's keeper? And the answer is yes. Not only are you your brothers and your sisters and humanity's keepers, but you have to continue to remember that and examine your impulses. Many tried to make Cain into an ethnic group or a representation of something, but in a sense, Cain is us. Faced with deep jealousy and insecurity is an impulse to do violence, the story says. Something we are all capable of doing. But the story also says that the ultimate religious unit in life is our relationship to God, formed by our choices and our promises and our actions and our internal movements of the heart. That's why when Cain took his brother's life, the movement is in the story is to show us that something ultimate is at stake here, that our relationship in the family of humanity is at stake when violence occurs, even small ones. And our calling is to seek the godly places in ourselves to confront the hatred or the dislike. Now, I'm driving around town just like you, and I'm seeing my neighbors and their political signs, and if they make you cringe and make you think up all kinds of things and even make you want to commit crimes, what does the story say to us? That we need to go talk to those neighbors. To confront those impulses is to do the work of God. Picciolini said, in fact, I've never in my life engaged in a meaningful dialogue with the people that I thought I hated. And it was these folks later on in his life, he says, that I thought hated, who showed me empathy when I least deserved it. They were the ones that I least deserved it from. And I started to recognize that I had more in common with them than the people I had surrounded myself for 8 years with. These people that I thought I hated took it upon themselves to see something inside me that I didn't see in myself. And it was because of that connection that I was able to humanize them. And that destroyed the demonization and the prejudice that was happening inside me. There's a lesson in those words for us. Maybe not that we are out here committing crimes of violence and hatred, but we are somewhere in between. That we each can move a little bit if we pay attention to the godliness inside. I was at the Temple Shalom 2 weeks ago at Yom Kippur, the new year for the Jewish community. And the first thing that happens in the new year is you admit to yourself how you have fallen short, how you have sinned against your family and your friends and your community. And Rabbi Paley, who's a good friend of mine, preached an elegant sermon about beginning anew, and he asked us to make 3 promises. He said, let God in, experience God in the world, and examine yourself with a holy lens. Now, I said to him, is that an old Trinity you're preaching out there? You can interpret this as for yourself, but I think he's asking, what is bigger than your life that you can let in to create a sense of your place in the world? What can you do to remind yourself what calls you to move to your best self? What corrections do you need for your relationship with the holy? What difficult parts in you need attention that can emerge as holy expressions of God? This is the work, the moral alchemy work. And maybe we're not moving from violence and hatred to empathy. Maybe it's somewhere in between those impulses that we are all capable of with each other. But there's good work to be done there, holy work. I want to close the loop on Picciolini because he says 2 important things in his statements that I want to tell you about that shed light on our current world. One is that he learned that Dylan Roof listened to one of his songs as a motivation for the tragedy in Charleston when this person went in and shot people inside the church there, the mother church. He regrets that deeply, and he knows that those actions can't be taken back, but that it's important to reflect back even on things you've done. The other thing is this, he said, we recognized in the mid-'80s that our edginess, our look, even our language was turning away the average American white racist people we wanted to recruit. So we decided then to grow out our hair, to stop getting tattoos that would identify us, to trade in our boots for suits and go to college campuses and recruit there and enroll to get jobs in law enforcement, to go into the military, to get training, and even to run for office. He says, and here we are 30 years later, and we're using terms like white nationalists and alt-right, terms they came up with. Back in my day when I was involved, he said, we used the terms white separatists and white pride, but it certainly was neither one of those. It was white supremacy, as in white nationalism and alt-right today. We need to be aware of white nationalism and supremacy and how it shows itself. It makes the pledge we have been taking this month, it's in your pews, all the more important as a way to reflect on our own hearts and souls. And we need to be aware of how this white supremacy is expressed in our world, from making enemies of our neighbors and friends to violent rhetoric to misogyny and the disbelief or distrust of women. So here's the good news. And that's that Christian Picciolini went on to found an organization called Life After Hate. Became, and maybe still is, one of America's only organizations that help people disengage from these white supremacy hate movements. And this is what Christian Picciolini looks like today. I like that shirt. In our year of courage, we are asking you to face the hard parts of yourself, to turn those leaden parts into shining examples of golden spirit. To maybe not have to move from this far out as Picciolini did, from hate and violence to empathy, but somewhere in between, in your own way, to shift with courage, to shift your awareness, to make moral alchemy of your life. So may your work today be to look inward for ways to move from hate or fear or a fragile impulse to demonize others, to empathy, to action, and to love. Amen and amen.
In this community, we give and we receive. May we go forth now to share the bounty of our love.
Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not the circle, make it wider still, till it includes, embraces all the living. Come wander at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken, and people keep no score of wrong and guilt, but will that human bonds remain unbroken. Join then the moon